Welcome everyone. My name is Dave Arnold. I'm the Executive Director of NextGen Precision Health. And it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Rachel Proffitt. So Dr. Proffitt is currently Associate Professor in the Department of Occupational Therapy in MU's College of Health Sciences. Her research interests focus on developing, testing, and implementing virtual reality-based interventions for adults and older adults post-stroke, pairing telehealth applications for remote delivery in rural areas, and rehabilitation clinical trials. So today the title of her talk is I Know Mom is Okay, Next Generation Precision Health Care for Older Adults. Really excited about this topic. I think this is something that my group is also trying to focus on, connectivity across the state that really embodies what NextGen Precision Health is really trying to do. Because if people can't get to the things that they need, they can't get it. And so this is really an exciting topic, and thank you for welcoming us.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming. If you trekked over here in the rain, thank you again. Thank you very much for the wonderful introduction. It is really a pleasure to be here to speak with you all. I know a few people in the room, and I know that people are coming from different departments, disciplines, backgrounds. So I'm really excited to share this with you because I think it has, like you said, applicability just beyond the way in which we're currently using it. I have visions for where I want to see this work go. So if you are interested in learning more, want to talk with me after this session, I'll have my contact information up on the very last slide. I am open to any and all conversations. So I am a clinician by heart and by trade. I am an occupational therapist. So I've worked with a variety of clients, and I see the need for new ways in which we can really leverage technology to, and this is a wrong title here, I'm very sorry. We can leverage technology to help support people living in rural areas, people with a variety of different diagnoses and conditions. So I wanted to sort of bring us back to precision medicine, precision health. I put a very, very, very abbreviated timeline up here. In 2008, the National Research Council, as a part of National Institutes of Health, they had their Towards Precision Medicine, sort of meeting council, if you will, and that was really when we started to see a push towards this precision medicine, precision health. There was a paper published by the just outgoing director of the National Institutes of Health, Francis Collins and Varmus, and their paper titled A New Initiative on Precision Medicine. And then from there, we really started seeing things kicking off and rolling. Are any of you familiar with the All of Us research program through NIH? And so that was launched really kind of officially. There were things leading up to it. In 2016, that's when it's got its official title of the All of Us research program, really with the goal of what's going on here at the NextGen Precision Health Institutes, that trying to bring people in and then get the science and the research out to the consumers where it matters, and really keep this a nice cyclical process. Then the pandemic hit in 2020. But I think for research and science, this was really opened up and brought forward new challenges and new ways of thinking about how do we do medicine, how do we approach health. There were no longer people living in our rural areas unable to come in for visits because the hospital was shut down. How do we deliver good, affordable, accessible care to individuals? And then because a lot of my work focuses on AI and machine learning, I tossed ChatGPT up there. How many of you are familiar with that? I hope most of you. ChatGPT, or artificial intelligence, AI, this was something that came out in the latter part of 2022, really for most of us to access, in which it takes and pulls in what it knows from the web, from all these available online sources, and you can ask it questions like, I did this once, I teach evidence-based practice. I said, make a 10-question quiz on qualitative research at the graduate student level, and it popped out a whole set of questions with answers. I think I had to edit maybe one of those to make it appropriate. But it's really amazing what it can do with just pulling in information. It uses all kinds of algorithms. If you're familiar with Alexa, If you're familiar with Siri on your phone, all of that, that's all natural language processing, artificial intelligence. And that can be kind of scary sometimes, right? AI, how much does it know? How sentient is it becoming? But I think there's really good ways in which we can start harnessing that, and I'll talk about that. So there's some really amazing things happening here just at Mizzou in precision medicine. So I wear hearing aids. I have worn hearing aids since I was 4. We have a genetic loss in our family. My mother wears hearing aids. That's about as far back as we know, and people have been tested. I wear hearing aids. My son does. His loss is not as significant as mine. I have my daughter is 1. We don't know if she will need hearing aids. She passed her newborn hearing screening, but so did my son, so we'll see. But this came across my inbox a few months ago, and I was really excited because I'm like, oh, this may not apply to me. It may be something that could be appropriate for my son, but this could be something that down the road, if this genetic hearing loss continues in our family, this could be something that could be treated. And there's some really neat work coming out from all of this. So this is just one example I popped up here. But this is typically what most people think of when you think of precision medicine, precision health. A lot of times you think genetics and how do we get the right combination of drugs, or could we alter some gene sequences, all of that, to get some great patient outcomes, those health outcomes. But I'm focused in a slightly different area with my research. This is just individual variability in health. This paper published in 2020. And these are very large, rough estimates, right? This is not at an individual level, essentially, but this is looking at groups of people. Genetics explain about 30% of the variance in individual health, right? And those are things that you can't change. So your genes are essentially what they are. We're able to maybe do a little bit of modification every now and then, but genetics explain about 30% of the variance, and that's where a lot of that precision health and medicine has been focused. Then there are social determinants of health. And again, these things are somewhat modifiable, not always for a lot of people. It's where they live, it's where they grew up, what their access to healthcare was like. Unfortunately, we see a lot of these factors, such as race and gender expression, play the roles here in these social determinants of health. And there are researchers that are focused specifically on this area, seeing if we can increase access and accessibility for people. They explain about 30% of the variance. And then where I'm focused is behavior. That explains about 40%. That's a large chunk. So are there ways in which we can look at behavior itself and not necessarily modify, but help people modify and change their own behaviors and use technology, use that precision medicine approaches, AI, all of that, to help us, look at, measure behaviors, and then help people make the changes that they want to make. And I love a good theory, framework, model. How many of you are familiar with the ICF model? How many of you know what ICD-9 billing codes are? They come out of this. Okay? All those little numbers and letters that are in here are based out of one of these different, typically a lot of times you're billing for something that falls under body structures and functions. So if you're coding for a ischemic stroke, there's a whole set of codes, but they fall under the body structures and functions related to the brain itself and whatnot. Where I'm focused is over here. Activities and participation. And where we can use the technology here is to look at and measure some of these body functions and structures to a degree, but mainly looking at the activities, and then specifically some of those environmental and personal factors, what sort of social supports do people have, that then lead to participation and changes in their overall health and health-related quality of life. All right, how many of you wear an Apple Watch, smartwatch, Garmin watch, something? Okay, I have a Garmin watch. I like to run outside, so this has a really nice GPS feature to it. But it tracks my steps, right? It can essentially track how fast I am walking, how fast I am running, based on GPS and arm swings and all of that. It's fairly good. So you wear your smartwatch, and every day it tells you your average walking speed, let's say. And this is walk. So 3.1 is pretty fast. How many of you ever walked on a treadmill? I typically walk somewhere in the 2 to 3 mile an hour range. So Monday, Tuesday, you're at 3.1, Wednesday, 2.9. You've slowed down a little bit, but it's a 0.1 to 0.3 change every day. That's a small amount. If you went from 3.1 and immediately changed your speed on the treadmill to 2.1, you would notice a difference, right? You would have to adjust your speed. But if you changed it down by 0.1, by 0.1, by 0.3, when you get to Sunday, you've lost a whole mile an hour. But because you've lost just a little bit every single day, you probably won't notice that. It's a little teeny little minute change. But guess what? Computers are really good at noticing those sorts of things. We as humans, unfortunately, are really bad at looking at those day-to-day, minute-to-minute, hour-to-hour differences. We notice big drastic changes, right? When all of a sudden you spike a fever, that's very noticeable. But if you were to increase your temperature by little bits every single hour a day, it'll take a long time for you to realize, oh, I think I'm feeling kind of warm, right? So computers themselves, algorithms, all that, they're really good at looking at that sort of thing. And so these are data from a depth sensor that we use in our research. I have to give a shout out to my colleagues in engineering. Dr. Marjorie Skubik leads a lot of this work, and she is retiring. She's not completely leaving the university just yet, but she has done some amazing work in this area. And so this is out of one of the studies in which she has run. And this is looking at, so this is the timed up and go time. Timed up and go assessment, you have a person sit in a chair, they stand up, walk, and then turn around and then sit back down. Ideally, you do it in the chair without arms. This is an estimated timed up and go time. And so this, you can see that the amount of time that it takes for that person to stand up and walk those 6 feet and sit back down has increased, but gradually, right? If you were to talk with this person, they may not even notice that they're starting to walk a little bit slower. But the computer said, whoop, hang on, there's something different here. This is not the person's usual trend. So we look back at the days before, they were staying fairly steady, and then all of a sudden they started to slow down. And so what this algorithm within the depth sensor did was it threw an alert. So that's this little orange line right here after the circle. And that alert, and I'll talk about who this might go to, said this is different. It doesn't know why. It's not going to assume that this is because of something. It just says, I noticed that this is different. This is different from the person's usual trend. And that's where clinicians can come in and say, oh, let's see what might be going on. Have a conversation with them. Check in on other things from our technology and sensors to see maybe there's something else that's also different. And do we need to do an intervention? Do we need to do something to help that person get their walking speed back up? And so for this individual, this alert was thrown, and here there was a fall that happened. And so maybe the intervention just didn't necessarily work. Maybe the intervention didn't happen in time. But for this individual, it was about a little less than a month, about 3 weeks. And then with the algorithm itself, after taking enough data from enough people, it's able to then say, if walking speed decreases by this amount, a fall will occur within 2 to 3 weeks. And that's the point at which we've gotten to. So this is early data in our algorithm development. So here's a look at the different sensors that we use. We have a depth sensor. These are all manufactured by Foresight Healthcare. Foresight is a spin-off company from the University of Missouri, so everything's still kind of, at home here. We have a bed sensor that is able to go under the mattress. This is an older version of the bed sensor, and I'll show you what those data look like. It looks at respiration rate, overall sleep restlessness, so are people sort of moving around in bed? If any of you have gotten sleep data from your smartwatch, it looks kind of like that. It can sort of tell in which sleep stage you are. And then it looks at heart rate through a ballistocardiogram. And it can basically track your overall, kind of what you might see in a printout in the hospital. And motion sensors. Motion sensors, I don't know if this room is equipped with them, but if you've ever been in a space where they want to conserve energy, it only turns the lights on when there is motion detected by that motion sensor in that space. It's not turning the lights on, it's just recording data once it says, oh, there's a person in that space. Depth sensor I talked about, it looks at walking. We also have another one that came out of a R21 that I had with individuals post-stroke, and we looked at upper extremity activities in the kitchen. We can distinguish between reaching forward, reaching up overhead, walking, like pulling open your dishwasher to put plates in, and then things that happen within this sphere of space. So we call in-hand manipulation. So you're chopping, you're cooking, you're stirring, all of that in the kitchen. All of these get fed up to our cloud server, and our algorithms look at them, and they throw up alerts like this. They also provide fall alerts, and I'll show you an example of that in a second. And this initially was put into Tiger Place, which is run through the Sinclair School of Nursing. There are 54 apartments. It's built and operated by AmeriCare, and then the clinical care model, so all of these health alerts and fall alerts to nurses and social workers are through the Sinclair School of Nursing. And all residents, they have to consent to research with their data if they want to have the sensor system in their apartment. It is independent living. Typically, that's where we put the sensor system. And I believe some people may still have them in their homes right now. This has been a long amount of time, longitudinal study. They've done standardized assessments with people, so things like the timed up and go, other fall risk assessments, other functional assessments. And we sort of had multiple studies come in and go. This is the most amazing finding out of this work. Mart Skubik was one of the primary founders of this work. Dr. Marilyn Rance, who's professor emeritus, was the other, and she is a nurse by clinical training. So this publication that came out in 2015, people that had this sensor system in their home were able to stay in that independent living 1.7 years longer than those without. That is absolutely amazing. If you think about the cost of assisted living, nursing home, or other long-term care, that is a huge cost savings, first off, and a huge extension of them be able to be independent and stay in their own space. I know people are, as they age, especially those that live in our rural communities, and this is the focus of where I'm headed, they want to stay in their homes for as long as possible. So if there are things that we can use to help do that, and this is one of them. And really, we're helping basically prevent that functional decline that unfortunately happens with aging. It takes a bit of work sometimes to convince my grant reviewers that people that stay stable as they are aging is actually a good outcome. They don't necessarily need to improve, but if they're able to stay functional and in their home for as long as possible, that's the positive outcome that we want to see. So here's a look at the data from the depth sensor. So some people look at it and go, oh, it's a camera. It is not a camera. It is a sensor. This is essentially what it sees. You don't know who this person is. You can kind of guess approximately what their body size might be. It's hard to tell if they have clothes on. You have no idea, right? This is just an individual walking through space. And so we can look at different components of walking, of gait, so gait speed, cadence, stride length. And then you can basically, everybody kind of starts to form their own sort of cluster of how they move. Everybody moves at different speeds, everybody walks at different speeds, people have different body sizes and heights. You can see here, this is 2 residents in a home, and then these little dots over here are the grandchildren that came to visit. If any of you have young kids, you know that they move very, very quickly, and they are a lot shorter than their grandparents. And so we have the ways in which we can process out and figure out who is who within those spaces. Because for this, right, it may not be able to tell which individual this is just from the depth sensor, but by pulling all these data together, you can see that this is one person, this is another, and these are sort of outliers. And so this is a fall that occurred, picked up by the sensor. It is able to, after years of training the algorithm, to say that this was a high velocity impact with the ground movement. So this person, it wasn't necessarily high velocity because he was kind of controlled a little bit, but when he went from letting go of the walker to hitting the ground, that was that high velocity. And then it's able to tell where the ground is. So that's the blue in all the gray there. So it knows that this individual hit the ground. It will then, these are called our super priority fall alerts that get sent to the care team. So in this case, this was from Tiger Place. It was sent to the nursing and social work care coordination staff that they have. Here's a look at the data that come from the bed sensor. So sleep stage detection, again, this is kind of similar to what you might get off of a smartwatch. Heartbeat detection. And I will say that this does a really good job. So I have a couple of one of my study interveners here for my RR1. And really we had one participant that had some like abnormal heart rate, a little bit of like variability that we were kind of like, oh, that's a little funky, and we're not sure what's going on here. And we reached out to the individual, and he was like, yeah, I think I need to go maybe see my cardiologist, and I don't know if he got some like medication adjusted, but then he went back to normal, and would he have picked that up? We don't know. Did we prevent something from further escalating? We're not sure, but we at least know that we were able to have a conversation with them. He was then able to go get and seek the care that he needed to address that and sort of went back to normal. And this is where the behavior piece comes in. I love this from the motion sensors, because you may think like, oh, you're just going to look at one motion sensor. Did they go in the bedroom or bathroom? That's not really what we're looking at. We're looking at sort of their movement within the home space. So we have one in the bedroom and the bathroom and the kitchen and spaces where people want to spend their time and like to spend their time. My mom quilts. My dad does wood turning. He has a whole wood shop. So if I were to put a sensor system in their home, I would put one in the space where my mom quilts. I would probably put one in my dad's wood shop. And if I noticed that they really weren't spending a whole lot of time in those spaces, and they normally do, that tells me as an OT, there's something going on. That's different. Why are they not wanting to engage in one of those valued occupations? So that's things in which they occupy your time. So that's what I do as an occupational therapist. Help people return to those valued occupation after an injury or something like that. And so this individual here, the black is the out of the apartment. So you can see morning, midday, late evening. This individual is living in the Tiger Place apartment. They're going down for breakfast, lunch, dinner, maybe outside to go for a walk, visit a friend, something like that. This individual did have depression managed and followed by a geriatric psychiatrist. And after personal losses, they had trouble eating. You notice much less black here in these sets of graphs. They're not leaving the apartment. They're not going down to breakfast and lunch to have that social time and interaction with other residents. And this threw up alerts to the care team to say, this is different. We're seeing far fewer out of apartments. We're seeing far fewer movement within the apartment spaces itself. So they intervene. And then after this, their activity pattern went back to more of a normal. And these are some really nice ways to sort of kind of step back and look at the data to say, oh, and this is where the algorithm can also look and see that, this person has been consistently leaving their apartment. Whoop, this is different. It'll throw an alert, and then we can come in and say, oh, what's going on? How are you feeling? How are you doing? Tell me about the fact that you haven't gone down to breakfast or lunch. And so here are sort of the clusterings that happen. This is where the algorithm, the AI, can say, these sort of things are our abnormal days, and here are sort of the cluster of our normal days, and that's when it's going to throw alerts on those abnormal times if we start seeing a new cluster form. We also have these alerts in a new linguistic style. So Mihai Popescu and his team have started working on this rather than something that's a little more, maybe not. If any of you look at this, right, as a clinician, you'd be like, okay, now I have to go click on something else and open up that data, right? That takes a lot of time. But to be able to get an alert in something here to go, oh, these data are potentially actionable. I know sort of what I can do with this and the questions I can ask the person to whom I'm providing care. So time in bed has been increasing. Many of you know that that can be potentially worrisome. Low pulse rate, low respiration rate, kind of taken together, like, what's going on? Then we start going into these things have been previously associated with things such as a fall, redness, leg pain, a UTI, something like that. And that's where being able to pull in, and eventually we'd love to pull in data from the electronic health record to say all these patterns and trends have been associated with other events such as a hospitalization or a fall, something like that. And then so this moves into where I've taken this, because it was great that we had it in Tiger Place, but they always had that care coordination staff available. What about people that live and want to stay in their own homes, right? They don't have a nurse that they can immediately call. And so I said, all right, could we take some of these health messages and fall alerts and give them to more of a clinical care team and also their family members? Dr. Subik looked at being ways in which we can display the data to the individuals and their caregivers, or trusted supports, if you will, in a format that is maybe a little more understandable by them. So green, yellow, red. Red being kind of maybe not that good, green being good, yellow, caution. Looking at sleep quality. How am I sleeping? What's my fall risk? In questions that consumers would ask. And then they also looked at using it with the Amazon Echo Show, being able to just talk and ask those questions. And so this is my current R01, because while I love all of this, so I'm going to poll you all. How many of you wear a smart watch of some form? So those of you that do wear a smartwatch, how many of you every morning look at your sleep data? Okay, so that was like a very small percentage of all of you, right? How many of you look at how many steps you take? Okay, more of you, right? So I love looking at my sleep data because I know it's estimating how much deep sleep and regular sleep, REM sleep. But if I have less than an hour of deep sleep, that generally means that I'm going to feel kind of groggy throughout the rest of the day. I figured that out over enough time. But most of you that I polled here that wear a smartwatch, most of you don't look at your own sleep data. You're busy. Or it may not mean something to you, even though it may be displayed in a nice format. You're like, I don't really understand what that means to me. And that was kind of the case here, because a lot of people they use their Amazon Echo Show to check the weather and the news. They didn't necessarily look at their own health data. A lot of times their caregivers or trusted supports did, but the individual themselves didn't. And so they put the sensor system in just independent living apartments. Not Tiger Place, no nursing or social work on staff, so there's a couple places here throughout town. And this was sort of the impetus for why I wrote the grant that I did and running the study that I did. We had one participant who, she experienced a stroke. And I will say, maybe not fortunately, but fortunately she had a fall when she had this stroke. And so that fall triggered a fall alert to the research team who tried to follow up with the participant, couldn't get a hold of her. We could see that she was lying on the ground. We're like, called their trusted support, couldn't get a hold of them. They were out of town, and finally called the apartment manager and said, like, hey, can we get in there? They were able to get there, get an ambulance, get paramedics there, took her to the hospital, got TPA administered, and she had very minimal, or if any, effects from the stroke. But my brain was like, well, why did that still happened, right? There's still something that happened. And Dr. Subik showed me her gait data, so back up here. This is not her data, but this here. And I looked at it. It was actually an inverted graph. I looked at the graph, and I think it was about 2 to 3 weeks before, her gait speed had started to slow down. But she wasn't necessarily looking at it. It wasn't throwing alerts to her. It might have been a graph, here that maybe there's a little uptick here into the yellow, but she didn't necessarily pay it any mind. My clinician eye went, oh, that was there was something different there, that is where I would have started to intervene, maybe ask some questions like, hey, how are you feeling? Maybe encourage her to go see her primary care physician, who might have noticed that her blood pressure probably was elevated, in some way related to the stroke. Not saying that we would have like prevented that stroke from happening, but that went to my head as a clinician, say, for people that are living out independently in the community, what can we do and how can we best use that sensor system to help support them staying in their homes for as long as possible and to be independent as long as possible. That's my current R01. We have the same sensor system put in the home. The difference between this and the one at Tiger Place is that we have 2 depth sensors. We have one that looks at walking, does the fall detection, and then the other one I put in the kitchen to look at the upper extremity activities in the kitchen itself. Same bed sensors, same motion sensors. The spaces in which we put those motion sensors, we're doing a little bit more of where do people spend their time, rather than at the Tiger Place apartments is typically a 1-bedroom apartment and there's only 3 places you can put sensors. Here we have people living in 3-story homes and we have to think about where do they spend their time, and then we ask them, they're like, yeah, I don't really go in that. That's the guest bedroom. I don't spend time there, and we don't put a sensor in there. The other thing we do is we provide them with a tablet. And so the goal for this R01 and the target population is our rural communities here in Missouri. People that it may be an hour drive to get here for care because this is the closest place for care. And they want to have care here, but that's a long time to come in. I know a lot of people, they schedule 4 or 5 visits for one day just to come here for care because otherwise then it's back and forth and back and forth. So the tablets that we provide them allow them to do the telehealth calls with us. So while they have the sensor system in, we have scheduled visits as part of the study, and then if we need to have some that are not part of that, we have the option to do that with the tablet. The tablet also allows them to see their own data. So it's not the Amazon Echo Show, it's just a standard tablet. It does have a little dock so they can sit it there and then do a telehealth call with us. And then my team, I have one here, the social worker on my team. So I have occupational therapy, social work, and nursing. And I felt it was important to have all 3 disciplines. OT for looking at patient overall activities, daily routines, nursing for looking at a lot of the health-related alerts and messages that would come through, thinking about medications. For a lot of our individuals, when we do their sort of intake baseline assessments, we actually ask them, I think the week before, to kind of go ahead and go through your home and make a list or collect all of your medications together, because a lot of them are on a lot of different medications. And then social work, because this is out in the community. For a lot of individuals, it may be, can we find them resources and other sort of components of healthcare that are closer to where they are, still knowing that they're probably going to come here for their main source of care, but is there an independent living center close to them? Do they need to get connected to their local Meals on Wheels? Is there a senior center that's around nearby if they're wanting more social interaction because they're starting to get a little depressed because they haven't seen anybody for a long time? And so, these 3, they really do work together and sort of help that participant focus on the goals that they have for being able to stay in their home for as long as possible and reduce any, self-identified disability that they have. And for a lot of people, it's, well, I used to be able to do X, Y, and Z, but I don't do that anymore because I've just been too tired, or I can't, or I don't have the support to do that anymore. And we work with them and problem solve and come up with new strategies. Maybe it's a different way of doing things. Maybe they can get back to that, but they need to get a little bit stronger in walking. And over the course of the years, help get them back to whatever those goals are. We still provide health messages and fall alerts, but rather than going to just the individual and or their family members, trusted supports, they're going to the team of nursing, OT, and social work. It is an R01, and it is considered to be a clinical trial, so I have people randomized to either receive this self-management intervention with the sensor system, or people also get the sensor system and just sort of a standard health education. So say they have arthritis and diabetes and depression and anxiety, we provide some resources and support for them based on those conditions, and they can call and check in, but there's no coaching, there's no strategy planning, there's no necessarily a focus on goals that there is with the self-management approach that we have. So what's next? Because we have some really nice work going on. We have people looking at building up the algorithms. I have colleagues that are taking this and using it beyond the older adult population. One is looking at using it with individuals with ALS, kind of partner with our ALS clinic here. I've had people reach out to say this could be amazing for my clients with intellectual and developmental disabilities that want to live independently. Think about individuals with MS that might be at a higher fall risk, and looking at their in-home walking, all of that. So I think there's a number of different ways we can take this. I also have a personal focus on individuals post-stroke. I had an R21 looking at developing the algorithm in the kitchen. I want to take this whole sensor system and put it and use it for individuals post-stroke as well, along with our older adults living in Missouri. The other neat thing that I think we're kind of on the cusp of is integrating the electronic health record data into the sensor system, into the algorithms to really truly provide those personalized health alerts. So it takes the individual's past medical history and then any events that occur as they have the sensor system in their home. So if, now they're on a new medication, they have a new diagnosis, there was some other event that happened, they had a heart attack, they had a stroke, all of that now gets taken into account, and the algorithm can sort of adjust to match the needs of that person. And then closing that loop, learned that term from nursing, is to integrate the sensor system data back into the electronic health record to the care providers themselves to truly provide those actionable insights. We don't want to provide like a whole long list of all these things that are coming from the sensor system. It needs to be something that clinicians can take and use, bring up in the next visit with that person, maybe do a follow-up, but it needs to be those truly actionable things for them. And then kind of what I said, broad scalable interventions for multiple patient groups, go beyond Missouri, hit our rural areas, go into more of our urban areas. I have colleagues at WashU that I'm hoping to kind of tap into because they serve St. Louis, it's city, it's urban, much more diverse than we are here in mid-rural Missouri. And I know there are going to be different challenges in an urban area versus a suburban area versus a rural area. But how can we use this sensor system to sort of help all? Because it really does take all of us. This is just a very, 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 very small portion of team that I work with on my R01. There are so many people that have come before me that have gotten this to where it is. I know a couple of you are actually sitting in this room. It takes, this top row here, this is actually my entire investigative team for the R01. Everybody tells me, like, you have 8 investigators on your R01? I'm like, yes, because I can't do it alone. This is engineering, nursing, family and community medicine, informatics / nursing, social work, and then Emily, she's my biostatistician. She's over in MOI technically, but she provides the biostatistical support for this study. Sheila is my project manager. This study would not happen without her. She's honestly probably on this Zoom call and doing all the little things in the background to make sure everybody gets scheduled and on time and what they need. Leah's my PhD student, also is absolutely amazing in helping run all of this. And I have I call them IT, but they're sort of my tech gurus, making sure all the technology function and work as it's supposed to. When the server goes down or the cloud goes down, all these things they run in and they fix all of this. And Sarah, hopefully some of you may see her coming into clinical practice eventually. She's an undergrad student, is absolutely amazing at working with our older adult population. She, on the phone with them, is beyond what I could ever imagine. Even as an OT working with people, she just has this amazing way. So here's my email address. If you are interested in collaborating, want to learn more, have ideas about where this could go, I love what I do with this, and I really want to see it go all the different places with all the different people that I've worked with as an OT, people I haven't worked with as an OT, and serve those, in our state. So thank you for your time. Thank you for coming. I really appreciate it, and I will take questions.
Any questions in the room? Just to get, I know online we have someone that is thanking you. This is a great use of technology to help people remain independent and to alert them to hopefully prevent falls and more serious injuries. So thank you. And then another thank you online. But any questions? Yes, over there.
My voice is. My background is clinical chemistry and laboratory medicine. So I had occasion to work in earlier days on what is called as taking the urine samples of slow learners or the children or mentally retarded children and measure their biogenic amines or the metabolites that reflects their brain activity. So if that is the case, then these can affect their sleep and their metabolic profile. So if these volunteers or your people, if they cooperate you to give either a blood sample or a urine sample once in a year like a checkup, then if you can combine that with the nutritional inquiry and the metabolism plus your lifestyle, then if you integrate three, it becomes what is called as lifetime health monitoring program or the part of that. And if they are the age of 60 or 70, then so the 10-year period you can follow up whether you can halt or you can reverse. Second question, with this sensor system, if you can combine their nutritional input and the inquiry of that and or their dietary style, then you can integrate that their sleep is good or bad depending on their intake of the food in the earlier part of the or the evening part of the day. Only in that context I want to make, I don't know whether you know, in community in India, it is called Jain community. Their concept in those days was not to harm anybody. So they are so conscious that they never used to eat after the sunset. So that even the insect will not be harmed. So they will eat by 7 o'clock or 6:37. They will get up early in the 5 or 6. So that in that period they are calm and quiet. So their sleep is supposed to be really good. So that is the case. Like in other words, the lifestyle approach with the food intake time, and that comes to 12 hours of intermittent fasting automatically without anything what the people are talking nowadays, fasting, all those things. Just what I mean to say is, can you combine lifestyle, little urine collection so that it reflects their brain activity by measuring MHPG, phenylglycoside, metanephrine, norepinephrine, phenylmandelic acid, they represent serotonin, catecholamine system of the brain, so reflects that.
Can you rephrase your last part of your question, or your comment?
Yeah, is it possible to collect some urine samples once in a year, 24 urine samples for 2 days, so that avoid variation, so that your sleep sensor and other system can correlate to their metabolomics of the individual, which is a big issue nowadays. That's all.
Yeah. And did I hear you also mention Alexa as well in there in your comments? Yeah. How many of you are in medicine in here? Nursing? What else? Do I have any OT? What?
Recreation there.
Oh, awesome. And then any other like engineering backgrounds? No? No. What?
You probably have some of that online too.
Yeah. I think there's, with all this, we didn't necessarily do anything like metabolic wise, but I think given everything that's happening here in this institute at Mizzou, there's so much that we can do to integrate together. I'll go back to like my first slide here, right? One of these, these are all the ways in which we can, pull all of these pieces together, right? I'm looking at the behavioral side of things. Could we pull in and do other tests, other things that already happen in healthcare, to get a full, well-rounded picture of the individual. This is just one piece that I think we can, really capitalize and pull in. It really hasn't been used in this way. So, like I said, if you are interested in working together,
That really leads into another question online that was saying that they're interested in your plans or thoughts about EHR integration.
Yeah, and that's going to take, I have colleagues here in informatics, others that are not listed on here that are looking at how do we then integrate in. So actually this is hopefully part of Noah's PhD work here. Can we start pulling in data from the electronic health record to make it even more personalized? I don't know what that's going to look like yet. Are there specific tests that we can use? What kind of data do all of those things provide to us? That's going to be some years of work and additional funding, but I think there's ways to start integrating all of that together. This is where I'm an OT, so that's not completely outside of my scope, but I recognize that all of these things can start being pieced together to give us something that really is truly that personalized medicine.
Yeah, and there's two kind of about wanting to learn more. So one asking, is this sensor system available commercially? They're saying it's amazing technology.
I'll say yes and no. So Foresight Healthcare, they are based in St. Louis at this point. A lot of the ways in which they sort of have it commercially available, so we buy it from them with grant funding to use for this. They do have it available, I believe, in like either nursing home or assisted living facilities, and they have a slightly different version of this that's available in acute care. Full disclosure, I have no stake or anything in Foresight. I just work with them for this stuff. So I make no money if you all run out and buy things. So yes, however, it being used solely in the home, I'm not sure if they are making that like fully commercially available at this point, but honestly, I would love to get it to that point. I'd love to get it to the point where insurance companies start saying, yes, you can purchase this whole system and we'll reimburse as, maybe with some intervention as well. That would be absolutely amazing.
I have two that are very similar, both asking how does one become part of this study. One who's looking forward to maybe themselves and their wife becoming part when they're age 70, and the other asking, is it an opportunity for anyone to join the group, or when might general population be able to benefit from this trial?
Yeah, I think that's going to take additional researchers also looking outside of the general population. And for my R01, you can send me an email. The criteria at this point are 65 and older, and we are still recruiting through the end of like October-ish. Live in a rural area, and that is fairly loosely defined as less than 1,000 persons per square mile. So Ashland and Fulton technically qualify. I mean, even honestly, the like far outskirts of Columbia, where you start driving out there and there's trees and not a lot else, and then little scattered houses. We consider that rural. And then they have to self-identify as having a disability, be it difficulty with one self-care task, dressing, bathing, or two daily living tasks such as meal preparation, shopping, financial management, some of those we call instrumental activities of daily living. So fairly open. If you know grandparent, parent, neighbor, colleague, friend, somebody that may be interested, we're still enrolling, and we would love to have them be part of the study. So love to reach as many people as possible.
Thank you.
So my question is on the legal side of it. So the current legal, the law was written really for medical diagnosis by a human, and we know that humans are fallible. And so using this kind of technology to help make clinical decisions, what are the legal ramifications if AI gets it wrong, or if the clinician doesn't use it correctly?
Yeah, I think a couple things. So go back to two things here. One, the alerts. I will say, for our study, we are very explicit, and we have it even, I believe, written in our informed consent form for research, is that this is not life alert, right? So you think about like all the legal ramifications behind something like life alert in terms of detecting falls and responding, and like the time in which they have to respond, how they respond, who respond, that we are not that we will respond, and we have a protocol in place for responding to fall alerts within business hours. We actually do even extended 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Friday. We have people still that, I mean, y'all respond sometimes to texts. We get a text with it on the weekends because we care. So that's one piece of it. I think that's going to need to be thought of as this moves forward. And I don't know if we're necessarily there yet in terms of thinking about how does this get, A, integrated into something like the clinical workflow. So that's the other piece here and where I want to see this go. Integration back into, into the clinical workflow itself, and those actionable insights. So, when you have other things that might pop up for you as a clinician, are you required to act on that or not? I don't know if we're to the point yet of making those decisions. I have specific protocols in place for my study, not necessarily for clinical practice yet. So I think that's what's coming, and I think that's where we need to really be careful and truly think about what is technology and how are we using the technology? What is the technology doing for us? I think really, I am a clinician and I never ever want to take the practitioner, clinician, whoever out of the equation. Yes, we are fallible, but technology also is as well, right? If you ever use ChatGPT, it gets most things right. It still messes up some things. My students try and use it to format APA citations, and it messes them up every time. Because technology can be infallible. It's based on what it knows, and it doesn't know everything. It knows everything up to a certain point. And we humans are also fallible as well. But I think we can complement and make each other stronger, but I think when this starts happening is when we have to start thinking about the legal side of things. I think we're already starting to have those conversations with using AI in healthcare. And so this is going to be an important conversation moving forward. I know my colleagues in informatics are already talking about this, so yeah. Yeah. Oh.
Sorry, did you point somebody else? Yeah, sorry. So I have several questions. Some of these we can talk about later. I'm excited about maybe building collaboration. So first of all, thank you for sharing your work and a great talk, very accessible.
Thank you.
That's fantastic. One thing I think that this highlights is what's like broken in medicine is we wait till things are broken to fix it. So this is a little bit more proactive. You're learning on the go in real time before things go completely bad. So I think that's what medicine and health and healthcare needs. One thing I was curious about, have you thought about using this technology for therapeutic interventions in discrete context?
Yeah, and so that's some of my work in stroke that I'm really hoping to use this and sort of have it be targeted for a specific, people that are still in that subacute phase post-stroke, when we start seeing, the sort of rapid return of function, hopefully, and we can use that neuroplasticity that is there. Can we use then the data from the sensor system to say like, oh yes, this person is on an upward trajectory, or we're starting to plateau, we need to change what we're doing as a clinician and provide that actionable. And that's where I think that data can be truly actionable to say, it gives us kind of an assessment in addition to everything that we can use clinically. This is just another another tool we have in our toolbox. I'm working with Dr. Kaselka over here. Hopefully, if we can get funding to move this forward in individuals that are either with mild cognitive impairment or kind of on the path towards Alzheimer's disease, can we start intervening earlier on and get a better assessment of people even earlier, so that we can, maybe target different medicines, different therapeutics, different interventions, different behavioral approaches to help them. Eventually they're going to progress there, but can we slow it a little bit? Can we give them a good quality of life and good function before they may need higher levels of care? So sort of using the data, the technology and the data to target. Yeah.
A couple more questions. So, I kind of see this could be eventually turn into almost like another vital sign of how active and people's mobility and activity. So first of all, do you look at circadian rhythms? So I do both clinical and preclinical studies, and there's clear trajectories with activity patterns in like mouse models of aging. So they go from wanting to exercise twice a day, running wise, to go just one time a day over time. So have you looked at those kind of undulations during the day? And then a follow-up question also, have you considered like outside of the home? Because I could see this having a ceiling effect if you're above a certain level,
Yeah.
like the home activity may not really see when you have a problem.
Yeah, and that's where one of the studies that they did when they moved it out into just independent living apartments, they paired it with a smartwatch to see if then we could get just overall total activity. The downside with this, at least in research sometimes, is that, I mean, a lot of us, like my watch is on most of the day unless I'm showering. For some older adults, they would take it off and they'd put it on the charger and they'd forget to put it back on. So there's there's limitations to everything, right? So the sensor system in the home is only going to pick up when it detects the motion or when you're in front of the sensor. So there's limitations to all of those. I think pairing with some wearables, being able to pull in like GPS off of the phone, then you can sort of get a bigger picture in the home and outside of the home. I think some of the sort of circadian rhythm piece can kind of come out of the motion sensor data. This really gets to look at sort of the whole person within their space, then maybe also paired with a wearable. We can maybe get a sense of like what their overall general routines and activities are. That's actually how I think about it as an OT. It means less circadian rhythm. It's just people keep very consistent routines, right? All of you probably do, right? You probably have a very specific way in which you get ready in the morning. You know, you move in certain spaces in your home, you leave, you come back. There's some slight variability, but you spend about the same amount of time doing certain things in your everyday. We like routines, we like consistency as humans. And so those changes, maybe we can detect some of those changes before they go from 2 times a day working out to 1 time a day. Maybe the duration starts to decrease. I don't know. I think we can pick some of that up here.
Great. Maybe time for one more question if there is. If not, thank you so much for excellent talk.
Yeah.
Please join us next month for the next round of the Discovery Series. Let's give one more round of applause.
Thank you.